the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, on whose land we meet, and pay my respects to elders past and present. Really amazing to think about our 60,000-year history in this country and all that all the Gadigal people and so on have contributed to it. So it's fantastic to be able to meet here today. For those who I haven't met, my name is Alex Harvey. I'm the Group CFO for Macquarie Group. And I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you all to our headquarters here for a really special lunch with Cass and the team from So They Can. So They Can, I mean, you're going to hear obviously much more from everyone else over the course of the next hour or so, and I know people in this room are already very familiar, but an amazing organisation. And the amazing thing I think you're going to hear about is that the impact that education has on communities in Africa and what that does from a lasting impact on people's lives. It's truly incredible. Now, one of the things that I've been able to do here at Macquarie until about May this year, I was the chair of the Macquarie Group Foundation, which was, you know, I've been here for 28 years, so I've had lots of fantastic roles in 28 years, but certainly the chair of the Macquarie Group Foundation was one of the real highlights, and we've been able to contribute around $700 million over the course of, this is our 40th year, so amazing privilege for me to be chair. But one of the great things about being chair, of course, is you get to meet incredible social entrepreneurs from all over the world, and we certainly have. I certainly had the pleasure of meeting some incredible people over the last 3 or 4 years in that role. But one of the incredible people is with us today in Cass Treble. Truly amazing, and I know that I'm sure I speak on behalf of a lot of people here. The passion, the commitment, the dedication to this really important endeavour is just remarkable, and it's remarkable in the context of so many people I've met, and you're at the top of the tree in terms of what you've achieved, and couldn't be prouder of my association or my friendship with you. But also, you know, obviously from a Macquarie perspective, there's a number of people who've contributed to So They Can over time, and it's been an absolute pleasure. So it's a real pleasure to be able to host you and the team here today. I think it's going to be a fascinating hour. Before I hand over to Pete, which I'll do in a second, you know, the amazing thing, of course, is that, you know, we take education for granted. You know, we take education for granted, and the truth of the matter is, you know, so many people around the world don't get the opportunity to receive the education that they need at the time they need it. And of course, education, as we all know, everyone in this room knows, education there's a lifelong payoff. And it really does affect not just the individuals who experience it, but also the generations that come after them. And so They Can is making a massive difference to things in Africa, and it's a great credit to you, Cass. I'm going to hand over to Pete Overton, and I just want to say, and Pete needs no introduction at all. All I want to say about Pete is that your commitment, obviously, to So They Can is fantastic, but to organisations like So They Can across Australia, just truly outstanding, Pete. I mean, honestly, outstanding. 35 years of commitment, your passion for these organisations, your passion for So They Can. We as a nation owe you a great debt of gratitude. Obviously, we see you every night, mate, so and we enjoy that aspect. But what you do for the philanthropic sector is second to none. So with that, one final piece of housekeeping: Macquarie Foundation is going to match all the donations from the Macquarie staff here in the room today. So I can see Sean, Lisa, and there's a few others around. Peter Farthing's around. I promise you I won't come up and sit next to you, or I might, but we'll match those donations. I think Sam Kennard is going to match the other donations. So really a great opportunity to amplify the effect of giving over the course of the next little while. So with that, Pete, I might hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. And thank you, Alex, for that warm welcome. So I'm just the glue that's going to hold this together. The experts are going to sit with me here. They're going to take you on a journey, I promise you. And I know the journey because we've had some meetings about it, and it's fascinating what's ahead and where Africa will sit. So within 10 years, the world's largest workforce will be African. Investing in Africa is no longer charity. It's in our personal and commercial best interests. Today, our panel of guests are going to delve into the why and how and what it really means for each of us here today. There's no doubt that the issues that we contend with nationally reverberate on a global scale. And with vast demographic shifts, we're seeing new populations that will certainly reshape our world, the global economy, and I think quite possibly the world order. Most notably in Africa, where seismic change is underway, 25% of our population will be African by 2050. It offers promise that can lift hundreds of millions out of extreme poverty, but it depends on our investment in education in Africa right now. So we're going to hear today about So They Can's pioneering approach for sociable and sustainable quality education in Africa. So They Can is a leading Australian NGO. I'm a proud ambassador for this organisation. Their evidence of impact is quite remarkable, with education outcomes like attendance, performance and transition improving by 20% across their 52 schools in East Africa. When you break it down to Kenya, 76% for girls in remote Kenya. In our changing world, it's time that I think we all reimagine, not all of us in this room, but all of us around the world, reimagine Africa's place in it. And that journey, of course, starts with quality education. So let's welcome our panel. Would you please come up onto the stage, our panel, and I'll introduce you to them as they join us on stage. So sitting next to me is the legendary Cass.
Legend.
Cass Treadwell is the co-founder and CEO of one of Australia's leading NGOs, and that is So They Can. Since 2009, when she left her field of medical law, believe it or not, she's been on a mission to end child poverty in Africa through education. She's a leading voice in sustainable development in Africa. Her organisation works in direct partnership with national to local governments and schools in Kenya and Tanzania, and has reached so far, or currently, 50,000 children. Her team has invested over $45 million in Africa. And in 2022, So They Can was awarded full accreditation by DFAT, which puts them in the top 1% of Australia's charities for effective impact, and means we implement development projects on behalf of the Australian government. That is an impressive achievement, Cass. Our second guest today is Mark Cubitt. When the Australian Financial Review did a feature on Mark, they described him as part of an exclusive band of former high-achieving, highly paid corporate executives who are determined to have it all again, but in a different way. In his former life, Mark was an executive at Merrill Lynch. Today, he oversees the Australian International Development Network, which he co-founded. It's a collaboration of private sector individuals, philanthropists, organisations, donors, corporates and governments from across Australia to drive Australian philanthropy overseas. Mark is regarded as Australia's expert in international philanthropy. Would you please welcome Mark? All the way from Tanzania. It's a pleasure, a real pleasure to introduce Rosalind Mariki. And the Swahili greeting is Mambo.
Mambo, poa.
So Mambo from all of us. Rosalind is the country manager of So They Can in Tanzania. So They Can partners with 52 schools across Kenya and Tanzania, empowering 50,000 children through education. Together with her team, Rosalind works in direct partnership with 34 of our Tanzanian partner government primary and secondary schools to reach some 22,000 children to improve education and development outcomes. Today, she'll bring to us the voices of those children and communities as part of our panel. Rosalind, it's lovely to have you in beautiful, wet Sydney. And our final panellist is Ben Clark. Ben is the Group Impact Advisor of the Phillips Foundation. The foundation was set up by successful business couple Liz and Anthony Phillips and their children following the sale of Camp Australia. Now, that business they built from scratch into Australia's largest out-of-hours school care provider. The Phillips Foundation is now one of Australia's biggest and largest supporters of international development. Ben supported the Phillips establish their foundation and guides the foundation's governance, strategic programs and partnership learning framework. Ben also oversees the Phillips Family Office Impact investment portfolio, ensuring commercial and philanthropic interests are aligned with the group's broader impact objective of increasing access to education and empowering children and young people in Africa, Asia and Australia to achieve their potential. So you'd agree with me, we have 4 super duper impressive human beings who are doing amazing work in Africa. So as I say, I'm the glue, I'm just directing the traffic. these are the people with the great insights into what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to start with Cass. Cass, in the next 25 years, Africans will account for more than a third of the world's young people. And I think when we stop and think about that, it is a staggering statistic. Equally staggering are the cuts we're seeing across the globe, triggered by President Trump's dissemination of US aid. We're seeing aid slashed on a global scale. So paint the picture for us. What does that mean now with these things in place in terms of slashing of aid on the ground in Africa?
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Certainly starting this year with the hearing the story about the withdrawal of USAID into international development was pretty heartbreaking, and it has been catastrophic on the ground. The BBC actually did an article, they ran an article that the Lancet Medical Journal published a while ago, which has forecast that 14 million people, 5 million of them being children under the age of 5, will die in the next 5 years because of USAID's withdrawal. So obviously for us at So They Can, that's an incredibly hard-hitting statistic, well, for everyone. We see, like I know Rosalind and Bonnie, our amazing Kenyan country manager, and our teams on the ground tell us stories about walking past storehouses full of medical and food supplies whilst our communities just are starving and in desperate need of those medical supplies. So it really is catastrophic. And I just hope that it's time for everyone else now to step up and fill that gap. Some people talk about the silver lining argument, which, to be frank, really frustrates me because, as Bonnie, our Kenyan country manager, said to me when that silver lining argument came out, he said, Cass, you know, bad decisions don't make bad governments make good decisions. And that is the reality on the ground. The local governments are not going to step up. So it's time for all of us to. But on a much more positive note, that statistic about a third of our population is going to come from Africa really excites me. Having worked for the last almost 20 years in education with these young people across Kenya and Tanzania, they are just such entrepreneurs. They have such determination. They have to be, because there's no social welfare umbrella to pick them up. And this also means then, I see it every day, like from little things like the kids running around, they'll make soccer balls out of a rock that they will wrap in dried grass, and they'll play soccer incredibly well. In fact, Comrade Smith, our ambassador from New Zealand, thinks they can play rugby with those balls even. And then also little things like, we'll turn up at school and there'll be kids that have snuck and hidden in the classrooms overnight, little young primary school children, to be there to use the electricity to study and stay in the classrooms overnight. So their resilience, their passion, their intelligence is quite phenomenal. And when you couple that with quality education like we deliver it So They Can, then we're developing the next entrepreneurs, your next clients, your next human resourcing internationally across the world. So it doesn't just make philanthropic sense to invest in education in Africa now, it actually makes commercial sense as well. So I couldn't be more excited about that statistic.
So how is So They Can different when you've got the issues and the challenges that are faced by not only the people on the ground, but your organisation? Why are you different?
Yeah. So there's this kind of buzzword in the development space called sustainability at the moment, and it's something that we grapple with a lot. And it's something very dear to my heart because I have seen far too often promises made to those in our community that are suffering, that are broken. And we've been very clear from the outset of our 20 years in Africa that we will not make promises that we're going to break. And this has strengthened our partnerships with our communities on the ground and their trust in us. So before we develop anything, we do a great deal of due diligence. We do our statistical and empirical analysis. And we did do that before discussing what we call our 3-phase development model with our communities on the ground. And so that means that they can then trust and rely on that. And it's not a buzzword when used by us, sustainability. So we have this 3-phase development model, which is one of our unique points of difference, along with our partnerships with the governments in country, our public-private partnerships, and our amazing local champions of change who are like our eyes and ears on the ground. And this 3-phase model consists of the first year of foundation, where we see if the communities have enough skin in the game. Do they bring the mud bricks to help with construction? Do they come to parent-teacher meetings? They all pass that with flying colours because they know education is their golden ticket. And then we move on to our second phase, which is the foundation stage, where we throw our 8 education projects at them. And then finally, our third stage is what we call our sustained phase for 2 years, when we're slowly withdrawing our financial resourcing, because we've seen that over those last 6 years, we have increased the capital infrastructure. We've built all the classrooms, we've put the water down, we've made the school farms ensure they're income generating for the school feeding programs to enable our exit to be successful. We've empowered the children through their children's rights, through our Keeping Girls in School and our My Voice projects. We've ensured that our school boards know what they're entitled to from their governments and have the access and ability to go and get those resources. So yeah, when we, and that model is working. That's why I can say it's not a buzzword when used by us. So we've got 4 projects that are fully sustained. We've got our very first school, Aberdare Ranges Primary School, which now educates 120 students, 1,200 students a year, and they don't have any support from us anymore, and we've been exited from them for the last 2 years. We have our clinic, our medical clinic, which now, without any support from us, goes on to support the medical needs for 10,000 in the community. We have our SEW Women Can project, our microfinance for women, and we've handed that business over to these incredible women in Africa who now make all our NEA sanitary dignity pads for our girls. And then finally, our Macquarie Teachers Training College in Tanzania educates about 200 teachers a year without any support from us now. We've built the college, and the Tanzanian government now fully fund that, and they also have increased the capex on the ground 3-fold. So we have a forecast that by 2029, all 52 of our schools will be fully sustained. And then that enables us to move on and scale and be in more needy areas. The only thing that's missing is you guys. So we really appeal to you to partner with us, be our funding partners, so that we can cement our work on the ground and scale it to other communities with this proven model. So thank you for your support today.
Thank you, Cass. Mark, we had a federal election earlier this year, and the result has meant that the Australian government's aid budget will largely remain unchanged. But how do you feel about the amount individual Australians give to international development?
Yeah, probably pretty measly, to be honest. But firstly, the government spend is 19 cents per $100. It's not a lot of money. So anyone who, even if anyone wants to argue, should our government be sending any money overseas? Well, firstly, it's not a lot. And that places Australia 27th out of 30 countries in the OECD. So at a government level, you absolutely cannot say we're generous. In fact, you'd be using harsh words. At the individual level, the Australian Taxation Office statistics show that 53% of Australians who earn more than $1 million a year, 53% of them do not donate to any cause. So there's a lot of people out there who are not on board the train that I think most of us in this room are. And so, so I noticed someone shaking your head there, and yes, yeah, you can. But I think the possibilities are there if people like Cass keep spreading the message about the sort of work that they are doing. If you think about the issues in our society today, the issues that Australians would care about, Indigenous issues, for obvious reasons, are native to Australia, and a lot of countries have Indigenous issues. Once we move on from there, if you want to talk about the housing crisis, I was in Poland 4 weeks ago. The Poles are talking about the housing crisis. US house prices are at record highs. Interest rates, by the way, in the US are very high, and they can't afford houses. Housing crisis is global. Climate change, for obvious reasons, is global. COVID was global. Inflation crisis a few years ago, Australia wasn't the only country. The issues that affect all of us these days are global. So I would hope Australians could get more generous with their giving. And then you referred to my background. I was at Bank of America Merrill Lynch, and I could put an argument that I don't reckon anyone in this room might jump on board with me and agree, but let me put it to you anyway. I could remember, I ran institutional sales in Melbourne to Melbourne and Southeast Asian clients. After the market closed, we could place $400 million of stock to institutional clients, pension super funds, in an hour and a half. You go home on a high at the end of the day because that's $400 million and you feel pretty good about it. And by the way, like Macquarie, there's a nice bonus at the end of the year as well. I would argue to you that $40,000 spent on teacher training and a secondary education in Tanzania would achieve more. And let me explain why. The teacher is going to teach thousands of children over their career to a higher quality education. The student, and I could name 5 of them, who's got the quality education and becomes a doctor, do the mathematics, they'll see 250,000 patients over their lifetime. That's what you get for $40,000. Back to the $400 million. Hypothetical, a week later, the stock tanks, it goes to half price, $200 million has been lost. It's been lost by who? It's gone into global pension funds, global superannuation funds, even individual mums and dads who got that in there. Everyone has a portfolio, and it sort of just doesn't matter. It's the daily movements of the markets. And it was the realization after I'd left the game that $40,000 could, I believe, have more impact than $400 million.
I knew that was your punchline.
Yeah.
It's true though, right?
Yeah.
You just explained it so well.
How
So-
I said.
A two-pronged question. Why do we need to invest in terms of global economies and workforces? And with your experience, do you feel that local African graduates will be competitive in the global human resource space?
Absolutely. If you've got the image of Africa of let's send some food parcels to some starving kids, well then you're like me, you're old enough that you watched Live Aid back in 1986. Things have moved on. Some of the phrases Cass was using about sustainability, capital investment, this is where people are making real change now. So an African kid who at the age of 14 wins a science prize at his high school for taking plastic bags, recycling it into bricks. Edgar's now 24 years old and he runs a business where 130 people bring in recycled plastic and he pays them by the kilogram and he's converting that into high-end furniture. He's received a grant from the founder of Reddit and Airbnb to expand his business to the size of 10 times. Currently has 10 staff. That is going to explode. Edgar's 24 years old. He's now come back to the high school and said, I want to fund the science prize every year. never get rid of it.
That's right.
Elvis, it's a fantastic name. He trades catastrophe bonds for Swiss Re in London. And I had the pleasure in April of meeting him and going up in the Gherkin, you know, that wonderfully shaped building. And we're talking about trading in catastrophe bonds, and he must only be 28 years old. These kids, when they get given the opportunity, they go for it. The alternative is herding goats, and goats aren't very interesting to talk to. If you give them the opportunity, these kids will absolutely go for it.
You can sell an investment. It's a no-brainer.
I've given away that game.
I love Elvis. What is a catastrophe bond for just our non-banking people? Or am I the only one?
Yeah.
No idea.
So insurance
In
companies
30
are worried.
seconds.
Sorry,
In 30 seconds.
Hurricane hits, it's going to cause $15 billion of damage. You've invested in hurricane catastrophe bonds, I believe. While the hurricane never hits, every year you get an investment return.
Right.
But if it hits, you're in trouble.
Okay. Good old Elvis. Rosalind, you oversee SoTheCan's work in Tanzania. Thank you, Mark, so much. Working directly with 34 government primary and secondary schools. I think the question that most of us ask is from afar is, aren't government schools in Tanzania actually funded by the government? And why is there a need to support education in Africa? Again, two-pronged question.
Thanks. Yeah, it's the biggest question is, yes, is the government there? But if we look at the context of, where are we working? So we have majority of the children and the population still live in rural communities, similar to where SoTheCan is working. And when you look at these rural communities, they are faced with multidimensional poverty, with lack of access to the very basic human needs. There's no water, there's no clean water, sanitation. A meal is just beans and maize. So there's nothing like nutrition and many others. There's lack of access to education, and there's definitely lack of quality education. But then you couple that poverty with a huge population growth. So when you look at Tanzania, we recently had our census, and the numbers were staggering because in 10 years, the population increased by 20 million people. And those 20 million people increase the pressure of all the infrastructure, the social infrastructure of the country. You name the schools, you name the hospitals, the health facilities, and everything else. So we are above 60 million, and that is just in 10 years. So yes, the government provides what we call a fee-free education from primary to secondary school. But then, how does this fee-free education actually kick in? So the way we are structured at the very low level is what we call the villages. And I don't know what's the equivalent in Australia, but you have the villages. And so that's a number of households in a community, and that's the village. And the policy says each village must have a primary school at the minimum, so that every child who is at the age of going to school must go to school. But then the schools building and what is required is really rests on the communities. So these communities who are very poor will have to put up a school, and then when they meet the minimum requirements for that school to be registered by the government, then it gets registered. And that is a minimum of 5 classrooms, and I'm going to put quotation marks. So they will normally just put up a building. Some children will sit outside and be able to learn, and then they'll put up some toilet blocks, very minimum. And once they get that registration for their school, then the government will send in teachers. And we are looking at classrooms with more than 100 children per teacher. And then the government will give what we call a capitation grant. And the capitation grant today for primary schools in Tanzania, in Australian dollars, it's about 6.3 Australian dollar per child per year.
$6.30.
And so, for the schools that we serve, we partner with, you have 1,000 kids, you are the head teacher of that school. And for the year, you get about 3,800, because 40% of the capitation grant is actually kept by the government to bring books to the school. So they are hugely under-resourced, and all the responsibility of that school goes back to the communities. So that is why the support is needed, because otherwise these children will never have the opportunity to have access to have quality education, and that will just be the dream. But in a few years, they become adults, they become the next generation that we depend on.
And can I just add to that, that as per that capitation grant figure that Rose just said, you have to have a birth certificate to be able to get that capitation grant. And so many that live in our rural communities they give birth out in the rural areas and they don't have birth certificates. So that's another thing that we're working on for our sustainability, is to get all of our students in our schools birth certificates to get that capitation grant, as measly as it is.
So Rosalind, our audience will spread the word to their networks as well. Just reinforce to us, $6.30 if you've got a birth certificate is the investment from the government. What will Australian investment from our community, how will that change the face and produce more Elvises, if you like?
A lot. So, firstly, you're looking at granting the children access, that they can actually access education. It is their right. And then the second thing is, how would that education look like? It's the quality of delivery of education. And it's the question of investing in teachers. It's the question of investing in ensuring that they actually can eat. I love this picture, that they can eat because they don't get breakfast at home. So they can have a lunch at home, but then they can have safe water, but they can also feel safe. And it's about that part. But then the second most important part is we are in a community which is still very strongly cultural. And you still have issues of female genital mutilation. You still have issues of child marriage. You have issues of violence against children, gender-based violence. In Tanzania and in the region where we work, it's ranked #1 in Tanzania for issues of those of FGM, child marriages, and etc. So with the funding, we can, as so they can, continue to support this movement through our fantastic champions of being able to say no to child marriage, say no to issues around female genital mutilation, and etc. And then, the last one is to reiterate the point that you have talked about, Cass and Mark and Peter, when you started, that, the next generation is going to be a big chunk of youth from Africa. And it's important that they have the quality education that can support us at the global level.
Rosalind, thanks for opening the window for us. We hear from our experts from here, but you've opened a beautiful window and a challenging window as well. Thank you. Ben, our final speaker, welcome. Given what Cass has shared about the need of scale for So They Can's development model, how do you feel about the amount Australian corporates and individuals are giving to overseas international development?
Yeah, good question, Peter, and good provocation, Cass. I think that, I would almost lift it up and say, are we satisfied with the level of giving wholesale? And the answer to that, I think, is no. We can always give more. There are various nations, as Mark referenced, outperforming Australia, and given the community through which we all benefit, there is certainly the capacity to do more. Specifically around international giving and what that means and look like, I think that there's strong evidence as to why we should be certainly allocating more philanthropic investment to developing nations, and specifically Africa, given the huge opportunity, but the huge challenges if we don't address those really in this short window where you've got mass mobilisation of young population, where education is in essence the lever, not only solving domestic issues within the context of those countries, but also the global ones that we'll face as well. And the human capital component of that, as Mark sort of cited, is massive. There's huge upside in that if you can transform the life of not only one but many through education. And now, I think, so I'm the emissary of Liz Phillips, who should be in this seat today and unfortunately couldn't make it. So she sends her apologies not only to the panel but also to all of you, because she speaks with a level of passion and conviction that I can't. And I think that if she was here, and sorry for channeling you, Liz, but I think that the message that she would be relaying is, well, first of all, her family spend a fair bit of time in Africa and observing firsthand, and have been on some pretty kind of grueling trips with Cass and her team into East Pokot and these areas that are not much fun, to be honest, but they are, they're physical education teachers by training and lifelong learners by virtue of that. And that's sort of the, I think, the hook into education. And part of the opportunity. I mean, they built Australia's largest out-of-hours care business, successfully exited that, and are very in tune with not only tackling big, hairy problems and coming up with commercial solutions to that, but also really driven by this idea around the multiple return of investment in education in particular.
It's all easy for us to sit here and talk about it and say this is what we need to do, and you are doing it. But what's our window in terms of getting this done and getting better than $6.30 out of the Tanzanian government and getting more money from, there's 53% of Australians who earn over $1 million, I think you said, Mark, that don't donate a thing. What's our window?
It's a good question, Peter. Maybe we need a segment on Channel 9 News about this.
Standing by.
I think part of it is how easy it can be, and that potentially that first experience. But I think good philanthropy, any philanthropy, is genuinely catalytic. I think so. As soon as you start, it becomes very difficult to stop. And as you get better at it, and I don't think for me. We look at philanthropy in the context of this family office as not only financial investment. So for example, I think we were talking before, Mark was citing this idea around these bonds around catastrophes. We come at it almost from a hedging of those catastrophe positions where we invest in. So we have one project that we're investing in earthquake proof school construction, which is around, there's nothing surer with the emergence of climate change, et cetera, and the issues that the world is going to face. How do you go through that sense of discovery, and how do you tackle the problems with the organisations and, more importantly, the people at the ground in understanding those problems?
Mm.
And then how can you actually learn so much through meaningful engagement and philanthropy, be that skills exchange, be that financial exchange, be that genuine friendship exchange that comes off the back of this. And again, just bring it back to So They Can. One of the things that has resonated so positively for the Phillips Foundation and those of us who are fortunate enough to be around the periphery of that and involved actively in it has been kind of observing and learning Cass and her team and Rosalind and the way that they don't kind of step away from those problems, they lean into them and they educate you through that process. And that presents a huge platform for us to not only kind of go on the journey of co-investment, but also the massive learning journey. And there's nothing better than seeing something work in this context. I'd argue I actually quite like the failure piece too, and the learning that comes out of that as well, because it is risky. Like fundamentally, you're taking a huge punt on ideas, and it's pretty easy to talk about it from here in the comfort of a windy or a nation sort of facility. But I think the other thing is that on the ground and the transformational opportunity that occurs is super exciting.
Okay.
Sorry, that's a really short, long answer to your short question.
Perfect. Well,
it's a Channel 9 segment. That's the answer.
Okay. Off script a little bit, but very, very briefly, the final word from you, Rosalind, as we wrap up today. What's your final thought and word for our audience?
Yeah, thank you. So before my final word, because I'm African, and we talked. I just want to share. When you go So They Can, we may think of them, but it's about everyone. And I shared this example with Rita, and Rita is here today, about Grace, who is our fantastic education program manager, who had the opportunity to go to Doha to represent So They Can. And she had never experienced walking at a traffic light, with cars passing. So she had no idea that she could not actually just cross. But with her suitcase, she ran on a 6-lane highway with her suitcase where there was no traffic light, and she just ran. She was just looking left and right, and she ran. And I was sharing with her today that just 2 days ago, I was in a building here in Australia, and I jumped in a lift because panels are supposed to be on the wall, which you can press 10, 13, and then there was nothing. And then I was just so confused. And luckily there was someone in the lift, and I asked them, and they said, "Oh, you have to go all the way down, and then there will be a panel outside, and you have to press it, and then press that, and it will tell you which lift to take." So They Can is very important, and any international development that goes to organizations like So They Can makes a huge difference to the next generation of this world.
Thank you, Rosalind.
Well said. Beautiful said.
Very briefly, Mark, your last word.
So with the Australian International Development Network, I've hosted tours to Africa of Australian philanthropists and wannabe philanthropists. And I would think every single member of those 2 tours has described it as life-changing with what they saw at the end of it all. The reason I'm on the giving side, the reason I do it is it's interesting, it's enjoyable. You get to meet the most amazing social entrepreneurs, other funders, and it's just interesting, and you do see the difference. Yeah, you can see the difference within 12 months, let alone over 15 years.
Thank you, Mark. Cass, your final word today.
Just to reiterate what you've both said, really, I'd really love to change the definition of charity from this one-way street of great white saviour helping these poor communities, because over the last 20 years, I have received so much more back from them than I have ever given. And I think all of us here that have been to Africa, I just taken Amber, one of our directors, with me last week over there, would say the same thing. So just to remind you that when you give, it's not just about I'm giving to help them. if you give through us, you will receive an enormous amount of impact evidence and empirical stories like Mark was telling. And it really is like, I call it a wisdom exchange, a wealth exchange. You might give your material wealth, but you will get back tenfold that emotional investment in how to just be a really purposeful and exciting human being. Every time I go there, there is a story that breaks my heart and warms my heart. There'll be two of them. And I need both of them to continue. And we'd just love to share that with you all. I wish I could take you all over there and see it, but I can't. Well, I could if you want to come, but just please, have some trust that if you start with us, the rewards you will get, your children will get, the next generation of, here as well as there will get, it will just make a really big difference in your lives.
Thank you, Cass. We've got a couple of minutes. Any questions from the floor today that you'd like to address to our panel? Please.
Cass, can I know, as a CFO, be remiss of me not to ask. Tell us a bit about financials for So They Can. Tell us what you need. How much do you raise each year? How much gets invested?
Great. I'd love to talk to you about how much I need.
10% of profits is plenty.
So we run on a budget of this year, it was around $4.6 million to deliver all of our education and community development programs on the ground. So supporting the 50,000 children and about 32,000 communities as well as that. We run at about sort of 17% administration and fundraising costs. So everyone that works with us is paid and remunerated. I learned that the hard way about 12 years ago when we weren't, and I proudly said to a big sort of foundation that I was trying to get money from, when they said, "What's the administration?" I said, "Nothing, we do it all because we're wonderful." They said, "We'll never touch you. There's no sustainability to that." So I learned that the hard way. When you say how much do we need, I mean, it's hard. I get emotional about it because I was literally just there last week and saw some horrors. There is no shortage of need. And now that we've got the right model that's working and we've proven it, we can roll that out across the board. And you could give us 20 million tomorrow and we will make an impact with that. All that's stopping us is funding. And it's really hard. So yeah, I just encourage everyone to work out what is enough for you. That's very subjective. And then give the rest away to things that are close to your heart. Thanks for the question.
Any other questions?
I was wondering, for your school feeding program, how much is put towards feeding the kids versus making money for the school, and how much of the food that the kids eat is from the farm?
Yes. So when we have what we call our school feeding program, so we don't fund that with our own money. We fund what we'd call the fishing rod. So we support them through creating school farms. So every one of our schools has a farm that the people will donate, the communities donate the land towards it. And we'll give them education around best farming practices. We'll put in drip water irrigation systems. We'll put in a borehole or a water system for that school, whatever's appropriate for the area. And then the income that they get off the maize and beans that they grow will help support the rest of the needs for that whole school, so that when we exit, it's that sustainable revenue stream. So the farms feed the children at the feeding program and hopefully generate more income so that we can exit. And it's funny coming from Australia and New Zealand, where I'm from, talking about school lunches, because it seems like a bit of a luxury, but the reality over there is most of our children will walk up to about 12 kilometres one way to school, where particularly the girls are at real risk of being attacked and raped in that walk to school. They will walk on, if they're lucky, some ugali and maize and beans from the night before, and then they're walking on an empty stomach. So originally, when we didn't have a feeding program at our schools, the children were not only not coming to school, but they would pass out at school and not actually be able to learn. So the feeding program is essential to get children at school, to keep them at school, retain them at school, and to ensure that they're learning and absorbing the information that they have. So it's a critical component that we're sensitising the school communities on. Thanks for the question.
Cass, can you explain the mechanics of the development programs that you do with the Australian government? How do they actually work?
Yeah, so essentially We went through a fairly brutal, it felt like 3 PhDs worth of, and then, an audit with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade to get our accreditation. And as Pete mentioned, there's around 1% of NGOs that get this full accreditation. So rest assured, your money's safe. So it's kind of like we are the development agents for the Australian government. So they have around 47 international NGOs that they fund and accredit. And then we go and spend their international aid budget on the ground. And so that's why they've done massive vetting. And it was really helpful for us to go through that process and put us in really good stead. It just means that, we can then, so we put forward to them what projects we want them to fund. And they give us around $1 million a year from that.
Any other questions? Yep.
Hello, thank you so much for sharing and for speaking on behalf of the African people with so much dignity. It's always a proud place for me to be. My question is, do you think there's a disconnect of how Australians give to Africa specifically? And if yes, what do you think the disconnect is? The way the Australians give to, particularly in Africa.
Well, I've got a personal opinion about that question. I think the disconnect is that there is this kind of paternalistic great white savior attitude, one thing. And I think secondly as well, potentially some, it's not just Australians, but some philanthropist donors, it's quite donor driven, and they will go into countries and say, I think you need a borehole, and the woman will, if they'd listen to the woman, they'd say, we don't want a borehole in our village closer because we like walking the 5 kilometres to meet all of our friends around that other borehole. Or they'll say, we want to plant tomatoes here, and then they won't talk to the community and they'll plant the tomatoes, and then the hippopotamuses will come out and eat all the tomatoes, and if they'd spoken to the community, they would have heard that. So my second answer to your question is, I think it's so important to listen and to work in partnership, not only with the communities from the local level, but also, as challenging as it can be, but it would be challenging here as well, work with the governments, because ultimately they're their children, and we need to exit and enable them to continue on. So all of our teachers at our schools are funded by the Kenyan and Tanzanian governments. So working with the communities in partnership is what I feel is critical.
One final question. Thank you.
Thank you all. Rosalind, from your perspective on the ground, what's the most misunderstood aspect of the African youth boom by the international community?
Thank you. So I think when we look at the global population, I believe that Africa's youth is the large part of the global population. And, in just a few years, in about 10 years, maybe even less, more than 50% of, around 50%, 42 to 50% of the youth in this globe will come from Africa. And if that is the number, so it means that is really our future. And it's a question of who can we determine where that future will be. I like the comments that were made by Mark that everything is global. So even when you're looking at the next workforce of this world, it's global. And I think it's important to kind of look at that as an opportunity. And if it's an opportunity, how can the world tap into that future opportunity? And I think education is key. That's the foundation of having a safe space for that future. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please thank Ben, Rosalind, Mark, and Cass. Thank you all.
And thank you, Peter,
That's
very
my
much.
pleasure.
You're an amazing
No,
ambassador. We're very
thank
lucky.
you. Thank you. And thank you to Alex for hosting us here
Yes,
today in
thank
this
you,
beautiful
Alex.
building. And hopefully, as I use that phrase, it's opened a window and maybe some doors as well for everyone to really have a think about the importance of, I leave today with two key words: education and respect. On your point, respecting the local communities and the government. It's their children, as you said. So we will work with you, but we'll respect how you think it's best we work with you. So a great takeaway today from me. So as Alex said, and we thank you again, the Macquarie Foundation will match all donations given today from Macquarie employees. And Sam Kennard from Kennard Storage, one of So They Can's long-standing donors, has generously agreed to match all other donations given today. So that's substantial leverage for us at So They Can, isn't it? And we really hope people have a good think about it. We'd love, you know, whether you go home, talk about it with your families around the dinner table tonight and say, this is what I heard today. This is why, how lucky you are that you've been to a great school. Why don't we think as a family or as a company, send out an email to all your employees and say, you know, I went to this great thing today, this great panel discussion, went for an hour. And as a company, we're going to do this for this organisation, and I'm attaching your names to our donation, all of you. So it's a thought. I hope it resonates with you. Thank you very much for coming today. Thank you again for Alex, Macquarie, and for everyone for supporting So They Can and the work they do in Africa. Have a great afternoon.
Brilliant. Well done. Well done.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Job done.